with one Don McPherson. Donnie, always great to chat. I want to start with this because we just heard from Steve in North Syracuse, and he wanted me to ask you this, so I will do this. Do you wish you got to fling it around like Kyle McCord back in the 80s, in the Dome? Do you wish you had a wide-open passing attack back in the day? I guess you would have been like BYU if you could have been doing it back then.
It's ironic that you bring up BYU because, what George DeLeon said about our offense is that we could have run Nebraska's option attack or BYU's passing attack. And we actually combined three different offenses. And so, I had the liberty, we talked about this last week, and McNabb as well, had the liberty to go to the line of scrimmage, and we could run trap option into the boundary or release five guys in the pass game. So it wasn't the kind of pro-style wide-open offense that they employ now, but it was a very wide-open offense. And we were sort of, George DeLeon was the innovator that actually predated the pass read run option in just a different format. But it's very similar concepts to what's happening today. When we did it from under center, we did it out of the I formation. It was just a little bit more towards the old school of football.
My understanding, Donnie, with like the thickest playbook known to mankind, right? Like the George DeLeon playbook, it was not lacking in pages, right?
The thing about the playbook, it wasn't so much that we had a lot of plays. It was that we ran a fewer number of plays, but from multiple formations.
Okay.
And so what was difficult for the defense to say, okay, we can defend the option, but it's hard to know if they're going to run option or if they're going to run if they're going to let, like I said, release five guys in the pattern. So it was a multiple option, formations, and then every week DeLeon would see something in the defense, and he'd come up with a different play, like a brand new play right off his brain, and those plays always worked. It was really kind of interesting how, and then they stayed in the playbook for the rest of the season.
And go figure, we certainly know the ties, as Fran has said it repeatedly, and Jeff Nixon would have worked with him as well at Baylor, that this staff has worked with George DeLeon, so they certainly know his history and know that as it relates to Syracuse. I want to know what you think here, Don. I mean, Kyle McCord's obviously had a fantastic start here. Like, you look at his numbers, more than 700 yards, 8 touchdowns, just 1 pick through 2 games. Projecting is always a dangerous game, but if you project it out, he's going to have by a wide margin the best passing season in the history of the program. Do you feel what he's done so far is sustainable here? Because when I look at it, it's not like he's had to do crazy stuff, right, to pull it off. It feels like it's all within the realm of repeatability here going forward.
It's funny when you were going through sort of where he is, and then you use that word sustainability, and you should have seen the look on my face. I started laughing. That's the key, right? That's the key to college football. If you can sustain through these early games, learn your lessons, get your reps in against teams like Ohio and even Georgia Tech that didn't seem as strong as we thought they would be. And the key is, can he sustain it? And that is the key to college football. That's the key to the game. And I think he can, because I think everything you just said, he's not doing anything outlandish. They're not doing anything really crazy. It's been pretty straightforward. He's got great weapons at the wideout positions. He's got great productivity from his running backs, and the offensive line is doing a great job. But when he's on time, he's incredibly accurate. And very poised and knowledgeable as a quarterback.
I look at it, and it just feels so important, right, to take advantage of this season with him. And it is his birthday, I do mention. So happy birthday again to Kyle, who's 22 years old today. Because it's your only crack with him, right? Like, this is his only year of eligibility. It's not like, if we don't get it right this year, we can get it right this year or next year. It feels like, man, you got to capture it now and then use him right as the model to sell the future of this program under Fran.
That really is. The last thing you just said is the part where I kind of winced a little bit. I don't think he's the model for college football that you're going to go out and get. The model for college football right now is whether or not you can pay a guy a ton of money to come play in your program. And so, as Nick Saban said in the first week of game day, and got a lot of heat for it, if you pay the wrong guy, you're out of luck, right? And so right now you're exactly right. Syracuse paid the right guy, and he's doing exactly what he was brought here to do. And I will say, we haven't had a pure passer. And I always say that Marvin Graves was like the best pure passer we've ever had, even though we've had some guys who could really, really sling it over the years, especially over the last 20 years. But I think there's no question about it that that Kyle McCord is the best pure passer that's ever played here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously what you did and Marvin did and McNabb did. I mean, you combine everything, and that's a whole different thing. But as far as just flinging it around here in 2 games, Kyle's looked pretty darn good. We got Don McPherson, our weekly conversation brought to you by Feldman Brothers Automotive. You never played Stanford because Syracuse has never played Stanford before. Go figure. This is a league game. Have you wrapped your head around this yet, Q? Stanford playing a game that counts in the conference standings tomorrow night.
No, I haven't, and I have to check myself on something I said to you a couple of weeks ago. I said they don't start conference play until the middle of October. Well, no, I was wrong because I wasn't even thinking of Stanford being a conference opponent. It's good news for Syracuse because hopefully they'll be 2-0 in the conference after this game, and which is nice to be in September. But you're exact, and there's nothing about Stanford that jumps off the page. There's nothing about them that says, "Oh wow, they got a great running back, we got to stop." They got this great pass game, or they got a big pass rush that we have to slow down. There's nothing about them that jumps off the page, and so this is an attitude game. There's nothing for the fans to grab onto about Stanford. There's nothing for the players. I'm certain that very few of them probably even recruited by Stanford, just because of the regional way that works. And so there's really nothing that really drives you. And we talked about this last week. So the challenge for this team was staying up all week, and then tomorrow night finding that spark. And like I said, this is what we used to call an attitude game. It's like, what is your attitude about your approach to every single game? And it's going to show up in this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously, Justin Lamson transferred from here to there would be the one obvious connection between the two schools, and then Syracuse's wide receiver from New Jersey, who I will stop blanking on his name on, and in a few seconds was verbaled to Stanford and changed his mind and is not now obviously at Syracuse. But yeah, they don't share a lot of common ground. Fran did seem intrigued earlier this week though about the idea of playing these California schools, that he's never afraid to expand his recruiting footprint. That maybe this can lead us to getting a couple guys from California or something down the line.
I think that's a great idea, and then I just go back to where Syracuse lost its way over the last several years, was thinking that you're going to start getting players from California. And anyone who knows me knows that I've been a proponent of focus on the Northeast, focus on the formula that made us good way back when. And I don't think you need to go to California to find football players. There's some great football players here in the Northeast, and you can really start to stretch yourself too thin, lose your focus, get distracted by the shiny objects. Let the Northern California boys go to Stanford and Cal, and let's keep out Jersey, New York, and Connecticut, and New England boys right here in the Northeast.
Emmanuel Ross is who I was trying to remember. He is the Jersey guy. He had been verbal to Stanford, and four-star wideout that was flipped by Fran. It was kind of one of the first things that happened in his first couple weeks here. We got Don McPherson with us. What do you make of travel effects on these games? Obviously, it'll affect Syracuse for Vegas and for Cal in a couple weeks. It's Stanford with a long trip this way. You never really had to do a crazy trip like this during your career across the country. What does the travel demand? Stanford came out yesterday. What role do you think that plays in a game like this?
I tend to think for these guys, not much of one. It's just they got to get an adjustment once they land and go through their walkthrough. Is it tougher going from the East Coast to the West or West to East? Depends on the individual. I will tell you this, Brian. I went to Albany yesterday went to Albany yesterday morning and came back last night. I'm exhausted today. At 59 years old, 59 years old, a trip to Albany wipes me out. So I think for these young guys, it shouldn't be too much of a factor. I think really where it gets is in the coaches and their rhythm for game day, and their rhythm in preparation on day before and game day. I think those are the big deals. But I think for the players, there's not much of a problem. As they always say, youth is wasted on the young. I think this is one place where being young doesn't hurt them too much.
All right, so Albany and back. You were 4 hours behind the wheel yesterday. I heard yesterday Stanford's flight. This actually surprised me how quick it was. They were only about 4.5 hours in the air yesterday, wheels up to wheels down. So similar travel. You made it. You made it a couple hundred miles, like 120 miles down the road. They made it all the way across the country. So there we are.
Exactly.
Okay, go ahead, Donnie.
No, I'm just saying, and travel is different now than it was, in those days. I mean, it might be a little quicker. The planes might fly a little faster, but they have more comforts on the plane. They have the iPads. They can do more work. They can do more. They can actually do film study. We couldn't do film study on a plane. These guys can pull out an iPad and do film study on the plane and never miss a beat in terms of preparation time. So there are a lot of different things now that you can do on a plane that makes that time go by and be really productive. In fact,
it actually surprises me. De Leon didn't have like a projector out for you guys on the plane back in the day.
Trust me, if he could have found an AC outlet, we would have been watching film.
Just projecting it against the wall or something like that.
Absolutely. You would have the biggest old lineman, and we'd be projecting off his back ass.
There we go. You stand up there. We're shining. We're working the option out. I want to get your thought on this, Don. We've had a couple of big picture, college football stuff come out earlier this week. We've been in and out every which way on this ACC lawsuits with Florida State and Clemson. Word coming down, maybe working on a settlement where there could be some revenue distribution that is based off of, a brand value, based off TV ratings, which obviously would favor a Florida State and a Clemson, and hard to quite say exactly where Syracuse would land on that. But what do you make of that idea? Like, good that it would keep the conference together, bad that it would be unequal? Where would your mind land on something like that?
I think that this thing has been a mess for a very long time, and people like myself who've been observing it and staying close to it and involved in some ways here and there, it's been a mess, and there really is no central leadership. Just a couple of days ago, if not yesterday, Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, says, "Hey, every school in Georgia can pay athletes." Similar, laws, similar things happening in places like Virginia and other places where you're getting the local government involved in all this. The NCAA, the settlement with the Power Four, the pending lawsuits on everything from conflict of interest and antitrust. This thing is an absolute mess, Brian. And until there's some leadership that steps in and says, "Here's what it is for everybody. Here's what it's fair." There's Title IX issues. I mean, it is an absolute mess, and it's a mess because there's been a lack of leadership and understanding that this thing was coming. And trying to, all these academic institutions that have 501c3 status who have to be beholden to Title IX laws. And then they have unions on their campus. So you got to be careful when you start paying players. They're going to unionize. And that's not so much that the players are going to have a union. It's going to be the non-player unions. All of Pete Sal's people who work in the Dome are in unions, right? So they're going to want the same benefits as your athletes. And when your athletes become the highest paid players or people on campus, the whole thing, Brian, every day there's going to be another story. Every day there's going to be another proposal. Every day there's going to be another lawsuit. And until there's some real leadership that sits down and says, how do we do this in a way that's fair, equitable, and if they choose not to make academics and make higher education central to it, then you have just a complete dismantling of the system for a very small number of schools who are going to go down that road.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch it play out quite literally in real time. You hear something new every day, and you never quite know where the week is going to take you. All right, lastly, Donnie, game tomorrow night. What are you sensing? How do you think it goes down tomorrow night in the Dome?
I think there's going to be a lot of excitement. Friday night game, I think there's going to be a big crowd. As we're seeing, ticket sales are pretty good. It's an exciting game because it's Friday night. It's the only show in town. It's going to be on ESPN, I believe, and so there's going to be a lot of excitement around the Dome. And I think the fans, especially on campus and adjacent to the university, have had 2 weeks to really sink in that this team is hot. Kyle McCord's hot, Fran Brown's looking good, and everything's exciting. So I think the team's going to come out, as I said before, with their attitude. I think there's going to be a certain energy. For those guys who played high school football and played on Friday night lights, and when you're the only show in town, it's pretty exciting. So I think Syracuse is going to come out really hypercharged. There's nothing about Stanford that jumps off the page defensively, offensively. They're just not that productive. I think it's going to be a pretty big night for Syracuse football.
Yeah, I'm leaning the same way as you, Donnie. I'm leaning the same way as you then. All right, I know you're all tuckered out from this drive into Albany, so we'll let you rest up, my friend.
I'm going to have my Geritol and get them underneath a warm blanket.
There we go. Get a heating pad or something. All right, man.
There you go.
Enjoy the game. We'll talk again next week, all right?
All right, Brian. Take care, buddy.
There we go.